You're listening to Women's Dream Enlightenment. Dream decoding, deep discussions, and spiritual stories of self-discovery to inspire your personal enlightened journey. I'm your host, Megan Mary, founder of Women's Dream Analysis. Let's bring in the light. Welcome. Today we have Louise Marlena. She is a visionary leader with an unwavering commitment to conscious leadership, sustainability, and innovation. She brings the transpersonal and the metaphysical into everything she does in her life. As a dedicated priestess of Avalon, she had a deep connection to the earth. As CEO of Carbon Positive Australia, she drives the change toward carbon reduction through innovative restoration strategies. And before working with them, she worked to fund 100 million tropical trees with the UK charity Tree Sisters. She is passionate about creating a sustainable, regenerative future, advocates for environmental well-being, and encourages a shift towards a more conscious, ethical, and purposeful approach to leadership. Welcome, Louise.
Oh, thank you, Megan. Lovely introduction. I wish it was 100 million trees. Unfortunately, it was only 10 million. But I understand that the organisation's now up around the 30 to 40 million trees. And I just want to say that that was an act of consciousness, because that was the bringing together of many, many women across the globe, all with a singular purpose to fund and plant tropical trees together, and to do that in circle together, founded by the most amazing woman, Claire Dubois, who is now based out in California. So she was originally from Bristol. But yeah, that is a story of how consciousness shift and how we can transform our world in ways that we can't even imagine.
Lovely. Well, I'm just going to leave that in there and call it 100 million.
Yeah, let's put it out there, hey, for the future that they manage to do that. That would be amazing.
Right, it's manifesting.
Yeah.
Well, the first question I'm going to ask you is the one that I ask everyone, and that is, what does enlightenment mean to you?
It's funny because it's a subject I don't think a lot about. So it's quite a hard question for me in terms of enlightenment. For me, I think more in terms of how can we awaken to what is around us. And to me, that is enlightenment. Because as we awaken to the magic, which is this place on earth that we inhabit, and we are, for example, sat in front of a tree and we see the tree, but the tree also sees us. And when we come to an understanding that the tree sees us as well as us seeing the tree, for me, that's a form of enlightenment. Because at that point, you can see yourself as the tree sees you, and you can see the tree as well. It's that connection to nature and that fullest connection of knowing that the world is alive.
That's a lovely explanation. I personally, and I know you have too, feel that where you're seeing, not just seeing. And that really is a shift in the way that we perceive our world, because we think, okay, we're humans in this earthly world and we are the top consciousness and we're just standing under a tree. But on a spiritual level, there's so much more happening. And I don't think a lot of people get that.
I think it's really interesting that the tree features a lot in our spirituality. So the Buddha was sat under a tree. Adam and Eve were next to a tree. There's the tree of life, the tree of knowledge. I think there's something there that it's not just a symbolism of the tree itself with the roots and the branches, but also in how nature is very much present in all of those stories. And so we're very much seen. In order to gain enlightenment, we have to be able to be seen as well as to see. That feels like a real truth for me. And it's been part of my journey to I suppose, understand that in ways that it's completely ununderstandable on one level. More, I would say, experience. How can we experientially be with that? And so one of the things that I've set out throughout my life, I think, is to be in nature in a way that I can experience nature as well as just enjoying it for its beauty and all of the things that we all love about nature. I mean, if we go out into a forest or we go to the seaside or we go to a lake or a mountain, we can move into that sense of awe about what's present there for us. And we can then move that awe into that experience so that we are beyond the awe into the experiencing of that place and open ourselves to be seen by the place.
Where it's an exchange versus a one-way experience.
Reciprocity.
Yes.
I love that word, even though it's really hard to say. I really love it.
It's perfect for this. Yes. So I want to talk about your spiritual journey. What brought you to the work that you're doing now, as well as your journey becoming a Priestess of Avalon. So where do you want to start?
Oh my goodness, where to begin? So I think if we go back to the very beginning, I was always very interested in feminine spirituality. What would it look like if God was a woman or God had a woman's face? And there was a lot of feminist books written in the 70s, people like Merlin Stone, that wrote about what would the face of God look like if she was a woman, and how would we experience the world differently, and how would we as women experience ourselves in our bodies and experience ourselves in the world if God was a woman. And I can remember, even I suppose I grew up in the 70s, which was, a time when women were moving towards that more feminist, equality agenda. And I can remember being maybe 12 and reading Cosmopolitan and getting very excited about being the girl boss and the that whole feminist piece. But I was very interested in the spiritual side of that. So I read a lot, but it was very academic. I didn't feel any sort of heart into that. And I think, like most people, when you get curious, you want, what's the experiential side of that? And the experiential side of that at that time, and I'm talking about probably the sort of late 90s, mid 90s, was very much, there is a witchcraft power. So you would do ritual and you would look at, Wicca and the whole witchcraft piece. And I was very interested in that, but not really. It's kind of interesting. It was yes and a no for me. It didn't quite fulfill what I was looking for. I love the nature element of it, but I must admit, whenever I tried to do a ritual, it would be like, well, you need the yellow candle and the green ribbon and oh my gosh, I can't get all the bits together. I can't even do it. It's too hard.
Yes.
And of course, maybe that's true, but I think there's an element of that that's really just not real. And the whole idea of doing spellcraft and all that kind of thing, it was just not me at all. It was just not what I wanted out of spirituality. What I wanted, or what I didn't know at the time, but what I actually wanted, was a deeper connection to nature and a deeper connection to who I was in relationship to nature. And I came to experiential goddess spirituality and trained as a priestess of Avalon in a kind of very synchronistic sort of way. I was actually looking for a camping holiday, as you do online, and a goddess conference was called in Glastonbury, where the goddesses would gather and where women could come together and celebrate all things feminine, celebrate feminine spirituality. And I just wanted to go. I was desperate to go to this. And I was a little bit nervous as well, because I'm like, I'm going on my own. I don't know anybody. This could all be not at all what I want. But I took my bravery in hand and headed off to Glastonbury for the Goddess Conference, which was run then by a lady called Kathy Jones, who was, I suppose, instrumental in beginning a kind of goddess spirituality in the UK. She, along with others, opened the Goddess Temple of Glastonbury, which was the first registered goddess temple in the United Kingdom since probably Roman times, I would imagine, when they had goddess Sulis or whatever, temples to her, but it was actually a registered place of worship. And she organized the goddess conference. And I went along and I was just totally blown away by these women who were looking at spirituality in a completely unique and different way. And yes, there was the people who came from the sort of witchcraft groups. There were overseas visitors. There were lots of different ways. But there was that deep underlying connection to the work that she was doing in Avalon that was connected to the place. So Glastonbury, for those of you who don't know, particularly some of your American listeners might not know of Glastonbury. So Glastonbury is a very small town in the southwest of England in a place called Somerset, county of Somerset. And it is very much associated with the Grail mysteries. So it has a long lineage of spirituality. The Grail is supposed to be buried somewhere in Glastonbury. And it was also Arthur, King Arthur, who was the mythic king of Britain, was supposed to have been taken into Avalon. So the Glastonbury is the landscape of the world, and then there's a liminal world of Avalon. So you move from Glastonbury, the world, into the liminal world of Avalon. And there was supposed to have been a priestess community in Avalon at some point in the times. Of course, it's a mythic reality. So whether that really happened or not, who knows? It's a mythic reality. But through mythos and stories is often how we can find our way. And you probably know there is a book called The Priestess of Avalon. And some of the stories around that were brought forward from that book. So what it was to have a priestess community in Avalon. Now, that was a story and a mythos. Now there is a genuine priestess community in Avalon, in Glastonbury. So since the early 2000s, women have been coming to Glastonbury to train as priestesses. And there are lots of different lineages now, not just the Priestess of Avalon training. There are lots of different Celtic goddess trainings and lots of women who are claiming and reclaiming that title of priestess of a goddess. And within that reclaiming, they're doing ceremony, they are taking people out onto the land, they are teaching priestess crafts, they are teaching ways of healing and ways of being in the world to others, holding space, holding ceremony, all of the things that you would expect, even marrying people. So they've even got legalized weddings here now, so you can come and get married by a priestess of Avalon, which is kind of quite cool.
Yes, very nice.
Pretty cool. So, but I'm kind of moving away from my personal story. For me, I was deeply connected when I came here. I lived literally an hour and a half down the road, so it wasn't as if I didn't know the place. But when I came here, I had an almost immediate connection to the land here. And at the time, I had no idea that it was because I had an ancestral connection to the land. At the time, I just thought, oh, maybe I'm having this spiritual experience here on the land, here in Glastonbury. But as it turned out, with a little bit of investigation, it turned out that my mother line was from Glastonbury and that I actually have ancestors going back here for centuries.
Wow.
So it was a spiritual connection, but also a very real ancestral connection. And so I ended up being here, undertaking ceremony, actually priestessing at the goddess conference at one point, and leading people into ceremony, leading trips and things for people to experience the land here over almost 9 years in total, which was a very good lesson in how to be a practical priestess. So I think sometimes we can think of that as a title that somebody wears that's, you're quite often hear, oh, the high priestess of, it's some kind of mantle that somebody's taking for themselves that's above something. For me, that's never been what it's about. For me, it's about saying that I have a connection to the natural world here. I have a connection to myself through that, and I am happy to share that. So as a priestess, that means that I take that as my sacred duty to share that experience with others. So it's probably a very different way of thinking about the word than perhaps other people might think about it. But for me, that's been my experience, and that's what I've been called to do. And it very much led into my environmental journey, because I think once you've seen and experienced yourself in nature, you can't help but protect the things that you love. And
Right.
for me, my deep connection and love of the earth, of the land, of the trees, of the water, means that I can't do anything but that now.
Yeah, it's wonderful to say you've combined them is a little cart before the horse because it just is, right? But it's beautiful to see how they go together, I guess, is what it is. Because so many times people have personal aspirations or spiritual experiences, but they keep them completely separate from their business world, the career that they have, the other work that they're doing out in the world. And it's my goal anyway to combine those so that I'm not splitting myself. And it's very, very difficult because I spent my whole career trying to separate. And I think in doing that, you're not allowing your gifts to really be fully utilized because you're constantly splitting yourself in half. And so it's important to combine them so that you can fully be yourself and also fully contribute to everything that's important.
Oh, so true. And look, I want to say to your listeners, I did not crack this on day one. I spent many years of that period trying to do exactly what you're saying. I would rush down to Glastonbury at the weekends, do my priestessing stuff, then rush back. I was a CFO of a corporate organisation at that point, and then suit up, boot up, and the two were not connected. And eventually it got to the point where actually it started to make me unwell. It's not a great recipe for a life. And so one of the things that I share through the work that I do through She Changes is how we can integrate our passion and purpose, how we can bring courage, how we can bring curiosity, how we can bring more of ourselves to the amount that's possible for us at any one time. I can remember when I went for my most recent job, I actually said to them, I'm a priestess. I'm a priestess of Avalon. That's what I do. I don't hide what I do anymore because actually that makes me who I am and my ability to deliver on what I do in my day work.
So well
Without
said.
that, without that, I could not do what I do. I could not hold space for that. It wouldn't be possible.
Yes. So when you're separating them, not only are you denying yourself that experience and that for lack of a better term, social proof of your passion, but you're also just closing it off a little bit and or a lot and not allowing it to flow into the work that you're doing if you're hiding. I think maybe that was one of the things that I forgot that we discussed prior that I really wanted to touch on because that's a major part of my journey. And it's also so many other people's journey that have to do something out in the world. And maybe that's not in alignment with their inner self, their passion, their purpose. And it's having the courage to step them together and combine them and hold that space for yourself against all other judgments.
And look, it's not easy. I mean, we all have to, I've been there, we've got to earn, a living. We live in this material world that's very much around money. It's very much around being able to show up in a way that your maybe employer wants you to show up. But there are, I think, so many opportunities for us to demonstrate the parts of ourselves so that we don't feel that we're having to hide. So I'll give you a kind of a real life example of that. In one of my roles prior to being able to pull things together, I had an HR part of my role that I had to do. And sometimes that's not a great job. you're dealing with people who are not in good spaces sometimes, and that's quite often why they're coming into that sort of HR space, because they're not in a good space. Maybe it's in their home life, maybe it's in their work life. They're not getting on with somebody, or the job's proving to be more challenging than perhaps they thought. But one of the ways that I was able at that point to just bring a piece of myself was, that other piece of myself was, how do I hold space for that person to be really fully in what they're in without judgment? Now, had I not done some of the things that I'd learned through my priestess journey, I wouldn't been able to do that. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there are other HR professionals who don't do that, because of course there are lots of them that do that aren't priestesses. So I don't mean it in that way. What I'm saying is it meant I could. So I was able to do that, whereas probably before that I wouldn't have been able to. And it gave me a certain amount of, well, that's actually benefiting me in that space, and hopefully benefiting that other person, that I've learned how to even just hold silence.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Which sometimes is all people need. They don't need you to actually tell them what to do or how to be. They just need you to be there and just to hold that space for them. So I would say there are many people who bring those skills in their day, whether it's nursing professionals, whether it's people in care, without calling themselves anything, which is why, to me, it's not a label. It's about a way of being.
Right.
So I would just say, for anyone who's in that space, think of the places where you're already bringing what you want to bring. And then it feels less desperate.
Yes. It's important to spend time thinking about that, because many times we're just rushed through our day and we're focused on where we are, and we're too worried to transition, because that seems to take a lot of effort and courage and everything. And so we're really just trying to stay afloat, right? Keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And that's where hours turn into weeks, turn into years, and then we end up losing ourselves a bit. And that's where you said that's where disease comes in too. Because eventually the further away you get from where you're supposed to be, the more it seems systems start to break down.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, for me personally, I had to make the break. I had to kind of just stop eventually. It got to the point where I had to stop doing what I was doing, and I had to really think about, okay, what's next? What does a really fulfilling job where I'm bringing the whole of myself look like?
Mm-hmm.
And that came through working at Tree Sisters. And ultimately, I took that role as a volunteer to begin with. I wasn't getting paid. So I think one of the things we talk about a lot on the podcast is curiosity, and we talk about courage, and we talk about the barriers that stop us from changing. And it doesn't mean that we've got all the answers either. I think when I also talk with Pollyanna Darling, who does the podcast with me quite often. We're just telling about our battle scars, really.
Yes.
It's not we've got the answers, and it will be a different journey for everybody. But I think sometimes it's just good to not feel like you're on your own.
Absolutely. And that's what this whole podcast is about,
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody coming on, sharing their story and their struggles and their failures. And it's not necessarily all success stories. It's
Nope.
it's just their tumultuous journey, and that helps others, like you said. That's
Yeah, I think telling our stories is such an important element of what I do now, is how do we tell our stories? And the fact that I'm happy to come on, a podcast and say, I'm a priestess of Avalon, and take people's judgment from that, because there will be people that will judge from
yeah.
that. It's just a commitment to being more courageous about living, and being more courageous about who I am as a person and what matters to me.
Yes. And in the course of your going through that and coming out on the other side, what role, if any, did dreams play in sending you messages or guiding your path or helping you understand where you were supposed to go?
Dreams are such an important part of all of our lives. I mean, that's why I love the work that you do, because dreams are, we have this whole part of our lives, don't we? That's when we're asleep. And one of the things, writing down my dreams has always been really important. So waking up in the morning, writing them down. Actually, I used to do morning pages. It's called the Artist Way. And part of the Artist Way is that you write morning pages. So they're 3 pages of consciousness, just writing whatever comes out of your head, basically. And the idea is to shift your creativity so that you become more creative, because all of that is out on the paper. So therefore you're freed up to become more creative. And I'm probably sure there's much more to it than that. But I got into a rhythm of writing morning pages. But what I found was after a while that my morning pages turned into my dream pages, because I would get up and do them literally on waking. And so I would write out my dream. And it gave me a place to kind of come back to my dreams and see what my dreams were perhaps reflecting in my day-to-day life. And again, I'm such a menopause brain at the moment. I cannot remember people's names. But there is this guy, and I love the way he works with dreams, which is he never expects that you can understand another's dreams necessarily. So what he does is he asks you questions about your dreams so that you can bring out more of your dream. If I was the dreamer, it sort of starts like that. And I love that work as well, because I love that there is symbolism in dreams that we all sort of recognize. For me, snakes appear a lot in my dreams. And for me, they've got their own symbology that's related to me. I mean, I know if you were to read a sort of average dream book, I think they're about sex, aren't they? Snakes or stuff. But snakes always come to me when I'm trying to make choices.
Yes, and I think I know who you're talking about. I think it's one of the founders of the International Association for the Study of Dreams that I am part of, and he developed his theory that he developed was, if it were my dream, in the group setting, dream group setting. And that one is a little bit of a different approach, because in a group, people can discuss the dream without forcing a meaning on the dreamer. So they're taking it as their own and then applying their own experience to it and saying, well,
Right.
if it were mine, it would mean this, which takes the emphasis off the dreamer and gives them space so that they're not feeling, accosted by the other's assumptions. But on the other hand, some people say it contributes everyone else's interpretation into the pot. And then it's for that person to say, to pick which is most relevant, versus the method that I use, which I've devised out of a combination of all the ones that I've researched and experienced. And it also uses a question answer basis, but it doesn't have anyone else's input involved, so that you can basically draw your own conclusions from your own experience. And I am helping you draw it out, but there isn't, hopefully, mine or anyone else's outside influence confusing things. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I started to see things that would recur because I was writing them down. So I would see
Yes.
where those recurrences would kind of come. And so I started to understand a little bit about what those dreams meant for me.
Yes. Yes. And that's one of the benefits of keeping the dream journal. There's so many, but especially in the case of recurring dreams, it really helps you see the differences over time and the similarities over time. And it's that dream again, but this time it was slightly different, and so on.
So I'm going to be honest, I haven't, so I did that religiously.
To coin a phrase.
To coin a phrase. For almost 3 years, I wrote down my dreams literally every day, because I was doing these morning pages. And then I kind of lost track of that, as you do. And so for me, it's something that I've always had an interest in, but I've kind of dipped in and out of, I think.
Yes.
But there's something really, I don't know, tantalizing about dreams and what dreams are for and why we dream. That just is always that sort of lingering question, because it
Agreed.
is so tantalizing, isn't it? It's just so interesting. Why would we dream? What's that about? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the explanation that it's just kind of, it's like a churn of the day, and so
Gibberish. Yeah.
I don't think it is that, because my own experience of recording them over those 3 years tells me that's not true.
Right. And I think it also depends on the time of night, the phase of the moon, the state in our lives, because there are some that appear more, I don't know, like aggregations of our day. And then there's others that are just epic sagas and visitations with loved ones and crazy messages that just are so profound, that aren't just you're at the grocery store. It's so different. So I think they really run the gamut, and they never stop, right? Until we do, or maybe they don't even, because we don't. So that's the other reason where I agree with you. I've dipped in and out, and there were many years where I did not listen at all and I did not pay attention at all. But ultimately, it's always continuing. It's a continual process every day and every night. And that's also why in my writing, I am constantly oscillating between the waking and the dreaming state in my novels. So the main character is constantly waking up and then going to sleep, and waking up and going to sleep, because that's what we do. And so she's spending half her time in the dream world because that's what we do. And that's not always really represented in fiction. There's some times where it's the focus of the theme, but very rarely. Yet that is our existence.
It's really interesting that you talked about seeing people that you love who've passed in your dreams, because that has definitely been my experience. I joked once to a friend, I saw more of my father after he died than I saw when he was alive. I mean, he did live in a foreign country, so it wasn't quite the joke, but it was true. For the first 6 to 12 months after he died, he would appear in my dreams as regular as clockwork. Even if he was just kind of not even participating, just present in some form. And that was really interesting. And it's occurred with lots of people that have passed. And so it's very comforting, I think, to know that even though those people have passed, that they're there and available to you in your dreams.
Absolutely. And that was one of the very powerful experiences that I had also after my father passed, where he came to me and just started speaking to me. And it was very obvious that it wasn't like some of the other dreams. The visitation dreams are just totally different, and
Yeah.
So and there's really no explanation, no scientific explanation for those experiences.
I think we know so little, don't we, about it
Right.
in reality. I'm actually a great believer in science and scientific principles, but I also know from the experiences I've had as a priestess in various scenarios through my dreams that there is things that we don't understand, and that's okay that we don't understand them at this point. But I don't think we should be dismissing them either.
That's exactly right. Yes. And that's really one of my other missions, is really just to say, hey, these are really important. These are powerful to help us come into alignment and understand ourselves and tap into our own inner wisdom. And the first step is just appreciating them, recognizing that they are important, that they need a place in society, which they don't have to barely any extent. I mean, yes, there are people who have dedicated their lives to researching them, but that's a very small percentage. And
Very
the
small.
majority of us, we not taught in school to appreciate them. We might not be encouraged to talk about them at home. We don't have any real way to understand them. And we're, on the contrary, taught to be embarrassed or dismissive of them. So I think that's the first step.
Yeah, and awareness, and just even talking about these things more, I think, is always a good thing, and just bringing them into the awareness of others without necessarily expecting too much. And I love the way that you do that, Megan. So
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, for listeners that want to find out more about Priestess of Avalon, the work that you do with the Tree Sisters, or just with the environmental consciousness overall, where can they find you?
So my own website is called shechanges.earth, so you can find me there. That's a place to go to if you're looking to ignite your own passion and purpose, and you can also find the She Changes podcast there. Tree Sisters, I think, is treesisters.org. I'm obviously no longer associated with them as an organisation now, but please give to their trees because that's always a good thing to do. And the same, I'm CEO of an organisation that reforests Western Australia called carbonpositiveaustralia.org.au, and we do some great planting of trees there. So, yeah, if you want to buy a tree, go along and buy a tree and help out. So, yeah, there's lots of different ways to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn, so I'm always happy for people to come and find me there, and always happy to have conversations. Megan, I met you through just an online conversation. So yeah, my door's always open for fascinating conversations.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to being a guest on She Changes as well in the future. So
Yes,
for that.
we can't wait to have you on there and to talk about dreams, your novel, and all of the wonderful things
Oh,
that you
yes.
do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Louise. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to our future conversations.
Yes, likewise. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you for listening. Did you enjoy this episode? You can now send me a text message and share your experience. Be sure to subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Head over to my YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button as well to be part of my growing community. Are you ready to take the next step in your spiritual journey? Don't miss out on the new Dream Empowerment programs. Unique opportunities for you to unlock your inner wisdom, discover your authenticity, align with your higher self, and bring abundance into your life. If you'd like your dream or awakening story featured on my show, submit it today. Your dreams have the power to inspire and enlighten other women on their journey. Visit meganmary.com to find out more.